to another Lawn Fawn video. Today we are introducing our Slimline Grassy Hillside borders and our brand new Slimline stencils too. And we have those in three styles. We have them in the Slimline Hillside stencils, the Simple Hillsides, and our Cloudy stencils. And these are all so much fun, and we're going to take a look at these stencils first. So these stencils are in the same style as our stencils that go along with our standard size card, our A2 size card. They're just now in the Slimline size, which is so cool. So this is the Simple Hillsides. They have two different hillsides, and they all have these awesome grid lines, which I absolutely love. So it has two different slopes of hillsides. Then we have our hillside stencil. So that was the simple style, and then this is the bumpier style. We have two styles within that stencil set too, and of course these all have those awesome grid lines, just like our original stencils. And then these are the cloudy that also come with two. So all of these have two ones, so they have different styles, a bumpier cloud and then more like a poofier cloud. And of course they have these awesome grid lines. Now you'll see there's two extra lines there. There's extra lines in the middle and towards the outside, and that's to help you line up with your Slimline cards. So here you'll see that you can line up with one in a portrait style, just like that, lining up with those grid lines, or you can line up with those outside grid lines, and that's going to line up perfectly on your card. I especially like using those with the hillsides because it helps me keep everything straight. So now we're going to play around with these stencils, and we're going to start with that simple hillside here. And you'll see I'm going to take the stencil and I'm going to use those grid line marks. You can't see them on camera, but they're very easy to see in person, and they're going to line up with those outside edges of my piece of paper there, which I've cut with the largest Slimline die. It's 3.5 by 8.5. And here I'm just going to take some green ink and I'm going to start on the stencil and then move off of it to build up my color. And I'm just practicing with my stencils here, just kind of seeing what they're going to look like. So I'm not worrying about it being too perfect. I'm just playing around. I want to see what these are going to look like on my card. And how cool is that? A perfect grassy hillside. Now these stencils, just like our original A2 size ones, have the stencil and the mask. So all you do is shift that stencil down and you're going to cover up your grassy hillside so that now you can work on your sky. So I'm going to go right along the edge of that stencil. You'll see I like to leave the teeniest bit of green poking out so that there's a nice seamless blend between the blue and the green. And I'm just putting just a little bit of blue, letting it fade out into nothing here. And you'll see that when I lift up this stencil, I have my perfect green hillside and I have my blue sky in the background. And so cool that you have the stencil and the mask. Now we're going to work with the other simple hillside. So once again, in each of these Slimline stencil sets, you get two stencils, and you'll see that this is kind of a steeper slope here, and I'm going to use those grid lines again to line it up. I'm holding it down with some magnets there, but you could also just use some washi tape or post-it tape. I inked it up just like before, and now I have that awesome hillside, and I'm going to cover it up with my mask there with the top part of the stencil, and I'm actually going to use my cloudy stencil for the top. So I'm going to start building that all up, and you'll see there, you can see I'm adding that blue right along that cloudy stencil, and right there you see we have these awesome clouds, but my green grass is still protected. I'm going to use the other side of my stencil for a little bit of a different look on my clouds there. And of course I could have been holding this down with my magnets, but I was just kind of working quickly until I got down towards the bottom, and then I was like, I better hold it down with my magnets now because I really want to make sure my green grass is protected. So you can see that part of that cloudy stencil is overlapping over that hillside stencil, and that's okay. That's going to give me these clouds peeking up from behind my grass, but it's still protecting my grass. And then to finish it up, I'm just going to add a little bit of blue to those edges so it's not so stark white. And how cute is that? Now those clouds look like they're peeking up from behind my steep, simple hillside. Next, we're going to work with our other pack of hillside stencils, and these are the bumpier hillsides. So we're going to work with this one first, and this one's my personal favorite here. So I'm going to line it up with those grid lines, once again, because I just love the grid lines. If you don't like the grid lines, you can just ignore them, but my type A personality loves a grid line that helps me line everything up. So I'm going to, once again, ink it all up, and then I can remove that stencil and have this beautiful hillside. One of the cool things about this one is you can use the other side of the stencil to get a hill that goes in the opposite direction. So right here, I'm going to flip it over So that's my original hill. I flipped it over and now I have a hill going in the other direction. And so you can layer them together or just use one in each direction, just depending on what you're looking for. In this case, I'm gonna layer them together to show you what that would look like. I'm just using the same color of green, but if I was really doing this for a card, I would use a darker color green or maybe a darker color one for the background and a lighter for the front. Just kind of play around with it and see what I like, and get this really cool dark to light layer. But there you can kind of see a look at what that's gonna look like. Now, if you want to create your blue sky, no problem. You can still use this stencil as a mask. So we're going to cover up one of the hills, and then we can take our blue and layer that on there. And then all we'll need to do is flip it over and do the other one. Now make sure you clean off your stencils in between when you flip them over. Ask me how I know that one. I did that by mistake. You got to remember to clean it off, because if not, you'll get ink just everywhere. So now I've cleaned it off, flipped it over, and I can protect the hill on the other side and still have that beautiful blue kind of peeking out from behind my hills. Now in this hillside set, there's a different type of hill, and it's a much bumpier hill. I really like layering this one in the background and then layering that more of a slope out in the front. I think that's really fun. You can also layer your simple hillsides with these bumpier hillsides and create almost like the look of a pasture. It's really pretty. So here you can see that cool bumpy texture. And of course we could flip that stencil over and get a bumpy texture going in the other direction. And then we're going to use the top as a mask and blend out that sky on top. And I think it looks so cool. I really, really love it. It's just a different look. I especially like this one for sand. So I do it out of a light brown and get a cool sand texture. Now here are the cloudy ones, and these are my favorite. They're so much fun. And this is the poofier cloud, which also happens to be my favorite one. So I'm gonna layer that on there. And on this one, instead of it being a mask, because you don't really need a mask for the clouds, there's a different style of cloud on the other side. So you end up with 4 different styles of clouds with the 2 stencils in the set. You can also flip these over and have clouds going in the other direction. So I'm gonna do that right now to get something just a little bit different. So here's the original way I used it. I'm going to flip it over. So that's the original way there, top and bottom, and then we'll just flip it over. And now we have 2 more sets of clouds to play around with. And that's what I really like to do, is alter these, mix and match them together, and that's going to give you a really cool kind of like dynamic cloud pattern. And so once again, I'm just layering on here. And here I'm doing blue, but these clouds look pretty out of pink and purple and all these different colors. And so you'll see, look how fun those are. Just by flipping our stencil and using both sides, we get such a cool look. Now here is the look at the other cloud that's in the Cloudy Slimline stencil set, and this is kind of a bumpier cloud. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you what this one looks like, so you can color that one, and then of course we're going to use the other side that's going to give us a slightly different style of cloud, and then we can do that. Now my favorite is to mix this really bumpy one with the poofy one, and that's going to give you like the most magical looking sky. So there you can see we've got 2 of those, and now we're going to bring in the poofy one and add a poofy one. And so you'll see when these kind of layer together what a cool look that gives. Now I've gone back to my bumpier one and I'm going to fill that in. And one thing I love about the clouds is there's no right and wrong way. You'll see I had a little bit of darker ink, a little bit of lighter. It all looks so good. So I've gone back to my poofier one, kind of alternating back and forth between bumpy and poofy, and we get a really, really cool look like that. So here is a look back at all of these cool backgrounds that we created. And what we're going to have next is Shari is going to show us how to make 2 gorgeous slimline cards using these stencils to create the coolest scenes. So you guys are going to have so much fun hanging out with her. So take it away, Shari.
So for this slimline card, I am going to be making my background totally by using stencils, so I have a nice flat background. I'm starting out with a rectangle cut with the scalloped slimline with hearts portrait. This is the larger of the scalloped rectangles, and this is just cut from some white cardstock. And I'm going to be using the simple Hillside stencils, the new Slimline Simple Hillside stencils, to create the hill that my little buildings are going to sit on this card. So I have picked one of the hills from this stencil set. There are 2, and I'm going to be placing this on the top of my panel here. And I'm just using some painter's tape to hold it in place. Usually I use my magnetic station, but I have the small one and this is a little wider than that. I'm going to be using some freshly cut grass ink as well as some jalapeno ink and my blending brushes to create the hillside that my little village is going to sit on. So you can see I'm just using this basically as a mask for the top, and I'm inking the bottom. So I'm going all over with that freshly cut grass ink, and then I decided I needed a little bit darker at the top, and that's when I'm going to bring in the jalapeno and make that top edge of that hill nice and dark. As you can see from the stencil, the top edge of the stencil is cut in that same curve, and when I'm done with this, I'll just shift it down and use it as a mask to cover up my grass. So now I'm pulling in that jalapeno ink, and you can see I'm just going to pull it in right along the edge, and it's going to give me this nice sharp dark edge for the top of my hill. So now I can peel off my stencil, and you see I have this beautiful hillside for my little village to sit on. I'm gonna go ahead and wipe off this stencil before I use it as a mask, just so I don't have any ink that I might smear. I've moved my tape to the bottom of my panel, and I'm just gonna line up the other curve of the stencil with the part that I've already inked and stick it down with that painter's tape to hold it in place. So this will just protect my hill at the bottom while I work on the sky. I'm going to be using some Moonstone ink to create the clouds, and I'm going to use a mixture of both of the clouds from the new Slimline Cloudy stencils. So there are two in this set. Each side has a different cloud figuration, and each one is a different size. So this is the bigger of the two, and I'm just going again with my blending brush and pulling that Moonstone ink from the stencil onto the paper. So I'm going to get a darker edge along the stencil, and it'll go lighter towards the top. So I'm going to use, like I said, a mixture of the two. You could flip this over and get another one, but I'm going to use the one that has the smaller bumps of the clouds. So this is the two different sizes mixed together to create this sky. And you can see I'm just working my way across, doing the same thing I did with those clouds at the top. And since this isn't a very tall sky, I'm pretty much done with my clouds, and I'm going to use that hill that I have as a mask, and I'm just going to add that blue ink towards the bottom. So that'll give the whole sky kind of a blue hue. You won't have that really bright white at the bottom down there. And then everything blends together. It's almost like your own patterned paper. While that mask is still there, I'm going to add some flecks of white metallic watercolor. This just gives the sky a little bit of texture and shine. And then once I have that looking the way I want, I can remove that mask, and you have this nice one layer background for you to put your images on. So you can see I've gone ahead and I've cut out and colored my images. I'm using images from Happy Village, Village Shops, Village Heroes, and also the new Tiny Friends. So I've gone ahead, I've colored, I've used the coordinating dies to cut them out. And then I'm also going to use the new Long Distant Hugs sentiment set to create my sentiment. It's going to say sending hugs and smiles to you, and I've already placed them all on a block so you get this nice long sentiment. I'm going to ink it up with some black ink and stamp it right along the bottom. I am doing my stamping first so that I can see the spacing and I can put my images where I want it above. First, before I lay out my images, I'm going to put this panel onto a card base. This is cut from some kraft cardstock, and I've just put some foam tape all over the back of this panel so that it's popped up from the card base just a little bit. Now I can start to arrange all my little buildings and my tree and my little people in the way that I want them. And then I'm going to go through and add some foam squares to these pieces. I'm using two different thicknesses of foam squares. So I'm using some thinner foam squares for the buildings, and then I'm using the regular thickness foam squares for the people, so they're kind of in front of those buildings. I really love how you can use the new Tiny Friends to go with all the buildings from the previous village sets. I think they're sized great and they work just wonderfully together. And then here is my finished card that I think turned out so cute. So to start my scene for this card, I've cut a piece of white cardstock with the small slimline with lift the flaps rectangle. And then I'm also going to cut some of the new textured dot cardstock with that same rectangle. This particular green is from the tropical pack. And I'm using that stitched rectangle so that I have that nice stitching detail along the bottom and the sides. Then I'm going to use the new Slimline Grassy Hillside borders to cut the top. So I'm just lining this up where I want it to be for the front of my card. This is going to be in the foreground. And I'll just hold it in place with a little bit of tape while I run it through my die cut machine. And then now you get this fun textured dark green grass for the foreground of the card. Then for the hill behind it, I'm going to use the stencil to ink a lighter green hill. So I'm just going to hold that in place till I get the placement. So this is one of the new Slimline Hillside stencils. This is the more bumpy of the two, I guess is a good way to describe it. And I'm using this one so that it'll be different than the Hillside that's in the front that just has one kind of wave to it. That is what the other stencil in the set looks like. I'm just using some tape to kind of hold it in place on the back. And then I'm going to do some inking with some jalapeno ink. So I'm just using my blending brush to apply that ink to this white background. I'm starting on the stencil and then pulling my ink onto the paper. So I'm going to get this sort of darker line at the top. You get that nice defined edge of that hill. And you don't really need to ink it all the way to the bottom like I'm doing here, because that grassy hillside that I cut earlier is actually going to cover some of this up. So once I've got it all inked, I can pull that stencil off and you see you get that nice crisp hillside. And then I'm going to shift it down because it's cut the opposite direction on the top. And I'm going to use that as a mask to protect the inking that I've done for the hill. And then I can work on the clouds that go in the sky. So you can see I'm just figuring out kind of where I want their placement. And then I'll just hold that in place with a little bit of tape as well as I start inking my sky. So for this card, I thought I would change things up a little bit. I usually ink my clouds with blue when I'm creating a scene like this, but I thought it would be fun to use a different color and kind of create that pink sky that you see like late in the day when the sun's setting, which I just think is so pretty. So I'm using the largest bumpy clouds from the Slimline Cloudy Stencils. I've done one kind of closer to the bottom and then I worked my way up. I'm going off the top of the card with that stencil there, so I'm just going to ink the edges where that stencil was so I don't have any really bright white places. And I thought I could get another one towards the bottom, but it didn't really fit the way I wanted it to, so I'm just going to go in with that pink and do the edge of the hill where the sky meets the hill so that you get that pink hue everywhere. And then I can just pull my stencil away and I have this nice inked background to start to create my scene on. So I'm just going to put this grassy hillside down with some glue so it's nice and flat. And then I just love how you get that texture from that cardstock on the front. I just think the two together is a fun look. So I've got some images already colored and cut out from the Bubbles of Joy set. I'm going to go ahead and put this little mouse on his bubble. He's going to be floating up in the corner. And then I'm also colored and cut out the elephant from the new Elphie Selfie Flip Flop stamp set. So that elephant's going to go kind of right down in that little dip of the grass. I'm actually going to go ahead and put her on there with some foam tape. I'm not going to put everything onto this background just yet, but I am going to lay some pieces out so that I can stamp my sentiment first and that I know my spacing is perfect and my images are going to fit around it nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and put my elephant on there because she's kind of important for the placement of the sentiment. These little bubbles are going to look like they're coming out of her trunk. So I've laid those in place as well. And then I'm going to lay my sentiment on here and space it the way I want it. And then I can just pick it up with the acrylic block and I'm going to stamp it in some black ink. So I'm just going to leave those bubbles there so I can see my placement, stamp that directly onto the background. And then I'm going to put foam tape all over the back of this panel and go ahead and mount it to a white card base. So now that that is on there, I can start to add all my other little elements. I'm going to add some foam tape to these little bubbles that are coming out of the elephant's trunk. And then I also have this other little mouse that has the bubble wand. So this scene, either the elephant is blowing bubbles or this mouse is blowing bubbles. They kind of have this fun little bubble trail that connects them in the center. I've also got this cute little mouse that's going to be chasing after a bubble. I'm going to put my little floating one up here in the corner. And I'm going to layer one of these smaller bubbles over that big bubble. Some of these I'm gluing directly to that background, and then others I'm putting a small foam square on to pop it up. So I've got that bubble for that little mouse to chase, and then these last two little bubbles, I decided to layer those on that large bubble as well, so you get some kind of dimension and layering. And then finally, I decided to decorate my bubbles with a little bit of glitter, so I'm using some Stardust Stickles, which is one of my favorites. You could also use some Prisma glitter or chunky glitter, depending on the look that you wanted. And then here is my finished card, which I just think is so cute and adorable. I love those little mice and that elephant blowing bubbles.
Thank you so much for these gorgeous cards, Shari. I love how you layered our Grassy Hillside die cut with the Hillside stencils. I think it looks absolutely beautiful, and I love this cute little scene that you created too. So gorgeous. And now we have some beautiful cards by the design team, and Mindy has blown me away with her beautiful sky she was able to create by using the mask that is with that Hillside stencil die. She also created this magical cloudy sky by mixing in blues and purples, and I just love how it looks. This card by Elena is so sweet. How beautiful are those dark blue clouds in the background? I can't wait to make clouds just like that. And this card by Tammy is so sweet. The purple clouds are just beautiful, and I love that grassy hillside die cut. Here, Letitia has our cool clouds with the grassy hillside die cut too, which is so cute with the sending big hugs. And then right here we have this adorable farm card by Audrey, and I love that she has that cool die cut in the front and the clouds in the back. Here Tammy has layered the grassy hillside die with our simple hillside slimline die together, and then stenciled cloud in the background, and I absolutely adore how this looks. Lynette here has blown me away with this cute custom rainbow sentiment. Oh my gosh, I just love it. These clouds are a perfect background to really make die cuts stand out. And then here Mindy created a portrait card, and she used those same dies but in a portrait style, which is so cool. Grace has used the reverse of our slimline die cut dies to create a really cool lake for her awesome elephants to play around with, and those stencils cloud in the background are just perfect. I love how Megan has added both splatters and inking to her grassy hillside die cut on the slimline card, and it looks so perfect for Easter. And then this card by Mindy is so cute and sweet, and I love how she used that hillside stencil to create a fun yard for her dogs. And then this is so clever by Elise. She actually used one of those hillside dies, those simple hillsides, to create a rainbow. How cool is that? And last, we have this super cute Easter card by Lynette, and I love that her background is completely stenciled and then she has her cute Easter themed die cuts on the front. So we cannot wait to see what you guys do with these new Slimline stencils and Grassy dies, so make sure to share it with us. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Bye!